My name is Johnny Campbell, and I'm going to talk about embracing AI and becoming a super recruiter next on the RecTech podcast.
Welcome to RecTech, the podcast where recruiting and technology intersect. Each month, you'll hear from vendors shaping the recruiting world, along with recruiters who'll tell you how they use technology to hire talent. Now, here's your host, the mad scientist of online recruiting, Chris Russell.
That's right, it's time for RecTech, the only podcast that helps employers and recruiters connect with more candidates through technology-inspired conversations. If you listen, you'll hear both recruiters and HR tech vendors talk about how they use technology to find talent. But first, this episode of RecTech is sponsored today by Job Fairing. The Job Fair search engine. Is your company hosting a hiring event or job fair soon? Well, Job Fairing will help you promote that event to a local audience in your city. Submitting your event is free, but they'll also help you to advertise it on channels like Facebook and LinkedIn if you choose to feature it on the site itself. It pays to advertise. To ensure your hiring event is well attended, head over to jobfairing.com. It's jobfairing.com and get it listed. All right. Johnny Campbell is the CEO and co-founder of Social Talent, a company that helps improve and measure your recruiter ROI. I'd like to hear more about that. He is from Ireland, but I think he's in the U.S. at the moment. So, Johnny, welcome to RecTech. Where in the world are you today?
I am in Texas today, Chris. Good to be here, and thanks for having me on the show. Nice warmer weather than it is in my colder home of Ireland.
Yeah, well, glad to have you on the show finally. We've known each other for a number of years now. You're always globe-trotting across the globe. You're on a tiny island, so I guess it forced you to go everywhere else where HR people live, right? So I guess, first of all, what's new and exciting in your world these days? What's top of mind for you?
Well, I guess what's new and exciting for me, company-wise, we've been doing some really cool stuff about changing our platform to be just more robust and scalable for massive companies. And that's because talent acquisition has just become so much more complex. It used to be, and you know this, Chris, a recruiter was a recruiter. Now a recruiter could be one of 30 different role types, and they have different needs and different learning needs and different tools they use. So that complexity has driven a lot of complexity for us as a business and as a provider. And that's kind of where I have so much interest in terms of how much more diverse this sector has become, and therefore the needs have so changed, the tools have so changed around how we're doing this thing we call recruiting or talent acquisition. Yeah,
I couldn't agree more, Johnny. I really think that recruiting is becoming a lot more technical as well, which is one of the reasons I started this podcast, is to talk about that, because you're right, there are so many tools and techniques and tactics now you have to use, and if you're not sort of like a digitally savvy in that respect, I think you're behind the curve, right?
Yeah, very much. And my business is about, empowering the recruiter, the human. So our whole business is about that enablement through learning in a measurable way. And, we have to make sure that we have our ear to the ground and we got our finger on the pulse around what are the things that recruiters need to know and need to be able to do these days, considering the tech environment, the tech stack around them. And that's changed a lot in the last while. So, that's that there. Today I was talking to a TA team around what makes them high performers. What are the things they need to look for in the future? They used to be recruiters, now they're called talent advisors. And what are the skill set they need today and will need tomorrow to be that talent advisor? Some really interesting stuff going on.
And just for the audience, to briefly tell us, what is Social Talent?
So Social Talent is a platform. It's a learning solution that's used by organizations to skill up and reskill their talent acquisition professionals through everyday learning. So it's software that teaches you as you work. You can log into and learn, get certified, get badges and accreditation, gamify the experience amongst the team. Quite social and really, for the company deploying it, measurably see the return on learning for the workforce, see the impact, smarter, better resourced, and better equipped, more knowledgeable TA professionals, measuring how that knowledge can actually impact things like return on investment and, hiring times and costs, etc. So analytics, learning, and a lot of good stuff in the middle.
All right, awesome. So, Johnny, you just published the 2017 Global Recruiting Survey. Tell us more about what that is and who does it.
Yeah, Chris, it's the third year we've actually surveyed and published this. And I became inspired several years ago from the JobVite social recruiting survey, which they used to run, if you remember.
Mm-hmm.
There was a bunch of questions I wanted to ask that weren't necessarily included in those surveys, but I was also really interested not only how people use tools and what they use, but how that impacts their performance. So the survey is designed with kind of two halves. One is we ask you, do you use LinkedIn? Do you use Twitter? Do you use Facebook? Do you use job boards? Do you use advertising? We also ask you questions, around what percentage of hires you get from these sources, what's your go-to place to, and then we ask kind of trick questions around how many people do you typically get a response from when you do cold outreach? How many people does your hiring manager typically interview from the shortlist you send her? So what we're trying to do is match behavior with output. And so we kind of pull together this is what people do, and then we pull together this is what the outcome, and we try and find the differences. Where do we find areas of higher performance, and do those people use different tools in a different way? And that's kind of our approach to the survey, not just to say, isn't it interesting how many people are using LinkedIn today or aren't using LinkedIn today? Mm-hmm. More, did you know that people who use this tool more or less tend to have the results? And that's where that survey comes from.
Okay. And I think you had about 2,000 respondents. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. 2,000 from about 80 countries. So these are pretty much half and half third party and direct hiring corporate recruiters. Okay. And we do segment to see if there are any noticeable difference, but generally a recruiter is a recruiter is what we see in this in the survey data.
Right. So what were the sort of the major findings? Was there a theme that kind of emerged?
Yeah, so I kind of went into it with 4 assumptions that I was looking to test, 4 things I was looking to see if they correlated with success. And the success was trying to find super recruiters. So we found that, the average recruiter, in the average of the 2,000, didn't have a very efficient process. So if we look at the funnel of recruiting from first outreach to hire, the average recruiters having to find about 220 odd folk in a search before they'll get a hire. Across the board, some differences in some countries. The Canadians are more efficient than the Americans. North Americans are, and we find the Brits are less efficient. We find the Dutch are more efficient. But generally, they're still not terribly different. And this hasn't changed in 3 years, this efficiency problem. But when we look at, as there was a small segment, about 10% of the respondents, these 250 people, who had a very different shape for their funnel. Their funnel was 550% more efficient. And that was the real thing, was to figure out what made them more efficient. Did they do different things? And that was the 4 assumptions we wanted to test, which were, is it that they're paid differently? Is it that they source or search or advertise in different places? Is it that they are very well connected and others aren't? Is it that they engage differently? So there was a kind of 4 core assumptions there we wanted to test to see what made a super recruiter.
Okay. So talk about that. What does make a super recruiter? What made those people different?
So there was kind of 2 big noticeable differences in the funnel. So the funnel has about 5 steps. You do a search, you contact people, you get responses, you assess and talk to those people, forward a shortlist to a hiring manager, and she calls forward a bunch of people, interviews them, and hires them.
Right.
And we found that there was 2 key differences in the funnel. The first was the response rates of these super recruiters was usually different. So the average response rate from somebody who goes and reaches out to someone they find on LinkedIn or Facebook or Indeed is around 35%. So 1 in 3 roughly. Whereas these super recruiters got a response rate of 9 out of 10, 90%. So almost 3 times more efficient. So that was the first big difference. It doesn't account for all of the difference, but it was the biggest factor.
Yep.
The second thing was, when they get the response, on average, 1 in 4 responses get sent to the hiring manager. And there's 2 things that play out here, Chris, if you think about it. One is, people who respond to you aren't always going to be willing to go forward. Some will say, yeah, thanks for reaching out, but not for me, not right now, not at that salary, whatever. And then you will make a decision as the recruiter to say, yeah, I know you want to go forward, but I don't think this is a good fit for you, so I'm not going to put you on my shortlist. But we found that, on average, 1 in 4 of these people went through. But with the super recruiters, 1 in 2. So these guys are doing something different, about either who they were targeting in the first place or what they were doing when they got a response. And they were the two big areas in the funnel that we saw unbelievable differences.
So the engagement and the quality of candidate really was different with them, right?
So it's interesting. When we looked into the data, Chris, the way they engaged is different. So they would typically use more unusual channels of engagement. So, most recruiters or half of recruiters first engage with an email. Same with the super recruiters. But they're also more likely to engage with email and phone and tools like WhatsApp. So, when it looks like when you first engage, the method you engage with seems to make a difference. Everybody uses LinkedIn. Doesn't seem to be a problem with that. There's no benefit to using it. There's no disadvantage of using it. But when you look at the super recruiters, they're more willing to use other tools. That's one thing. They also seem to search in different places. They are much more likely to use multiple sources of attracting and finding talent. We saw them, they're 15% more likely to use Facebook. They're about 135% more likely to use Twitter. About the same, more likely to use Google Plus and WhatsApp. So it isn't that they're using any one tool or finding people in a special place. They're just more multi-channel than the average recruiter, which I guess informs them about. It gives you a wider view of the candidate. You're getting a bigger picture of who they are, but they also seem to be more informed as to the domain or expertise area that they're recruiting for, much more knowledgeable around their sector, their role, which obviously is going to drive better personalization of their outreach effort and probably a higher quality conversation with the candidate when they do get to talk to them. So they're kind of, where they find or attract the talent is more diverse. How they reach out to them, again, is more diverse, more multi-channel. And then they seem to have much higher expertise and knowledge around the candidate's area of expertise or the industry that they work within, as opposed to just being better recruiters.
Oh, that's really interesting. You mentioned like WhatsApp there, Johnny. What's it like? Is that sort of outside of the U.S.? Is that one of the major sourcing tools, if you will, or among recruiters? Or
so not a sourcing tool, no, more an engagement tool. Yeah, just a way to say hi, hey, want to reach out to you, want to chat with you. Can we set up a call? What did you think about that interview? I think they're the really super recruiters that recognize that people use different channels for different things, and channels like WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger have just higher engagement than email and LinkedIn emails and other things like that. So they're kind of saying, well, okay, they may not be traditional recruiting tools, but they are the way people talk and communicate. So you're going to get faster response times, more engagement by using the tools that your candidates are more comfortable with.
Yeah. So, all right. So AI and robots are coming to the recruiting field, Johnny. So how can recruiters ensure that they're still relevant as these technologies, begin to creep into their jobs? I mean, you hear a lot of vendors talking about, AI is here to kind of assist you or make your job more efficient. Do you buy into that, or tell us more around what you think about AI?
So I absolutely buy into that. And one of the pretexts of the survey was to kind of say, well, what is AI replacing? And AI, people have been talking about AI and machine learning for ages. It's just a new way of using technology, right? And that's great. But technology is and should be replacing parts of our role. I tell a story today about when I started in recruiting in 1998. I sound like an old man now talking old war stories. Every Friday afternoon in the agency I worked with, we would stuff envelopes for 3 hours. And it was our mail shots. We would basically print a one-pager, summarize our best candidates of the week, and we'd mail them out to our clients. Get high licking the glue off envelopes every afternoon, right? So email first automated that, then CRMs and other tools, and then Facebook advertising does that. That replaced my Friday afternoons. That's a brilliant thing. Technology quickly gave me my Friday afternoons back. So I think you look at the functionality of AI and chatbots today in recruiting, It's around answering frequently asked questions, which is just repetitive for someone to do. It is acquiring data in a faster, more efficient way. It is allowing more sophisticated ways of replying. And it is doing things like setting up interviews and even doing deep dive searches, pulling together shortlists and then stack ranking them. Like volume sourcing, recruitment administration, they aren't things people enjoy doing. They're part of the job, but we all hate them. I don't mean deep dive sourcing and specialist kind of sourcing. I mean the kind of sourcing you have to do when you have the same jobs over and over again and keep going back and finding new talent pools. That kind of stuff should be automated. And that's where I see right now, that's what the AI machine learning is doing that. And that's brilliant because it gives us our time back to do things that we really should be doing more of.
The study also had some numbers around networking, and if that is still important to recruiters, what were some of the findings around offline networking?
So I've been one of the biggest advocates of building a massive, big LinkedIn network. Connect with everybody, get your 10, 20,000 contacts, just go for it. And that was a time when you kind of had to use LinkedIn because you couldn't see all the profiles. But I always believed that was important. Seeing that you've got 46 connections in common is good. But I've never been able to test it. So we tested that and we asked people how networked they were. I think, I don't have the data right in front of me, but something like 40-something% of recruiters have a network larger than 5,000 connections on LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. It's pretty awesome. So we said, let's take that cross-section. 26%. About a quarter of them have a network bigger than 5,000. We took that group which was about 500 recruiters, and we looked at all of their responses and all their data in their funnel, their conversions, their output, and there was no statistical difference in their outputs to the average recruiter. Having a very big or very small network makes absolutely no difference statistically to your output. So, for me, it really begs the question over, quality versus quantity. And I would argue, looking at that one is the data says it absolutely is not quantity. What it doesn't tell us, but what I would make an assumption is that quality still does matter. And it's not how many people you're networked with within your sector. It's who you choose to be networked with in your sector that's going to make a difference. So
when it comes to things like sourcing, Johnny, you mentioned LinkedIn, of course, things like Facebook. What are some of the unsung tools for sourcers that are kind of going unnoticed these days or not being used as they should? I mean, do you have any... Does anything come to mind, like an Instagram, for instance, or some other channel like that?
Yeah, so like on a top level, social media, which I'll include professional networking, which we all know means LinkedIn, came out as the top source of talent that people actually hire. About 34% of hires come from that source, according to the self-reported data. 26% coming from paid job boards. So job boards and social media together still account for about 60% of all hires. Right? That's a no-brainer. Then it gets down to your career site and referrals and stuff. So when we took that number one source, the kind of social and professional media, LinkedIn is steady. Pretty much everybody uses LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. All the super recruiters use LinkedIn. So again, you should use LinkedIn, but it doesn't give you an advantage. But definitely use it. But we looked at some of the tools that were outliers, if you like. Facebook is probably the number 2 tool, those kind of social web tools that people use to source and attract talent. About 46% are using Facebook this year. That's up from about 37% last year. So that's really on the rise. So nearly half of recruiters using it. Whereas Twitter is plummeting. Twitter back in 2015, 56% of recruiters were using it. That dropped to 37% last year, 23% this year. Google Plus, people don't even talk about Google Plus anymore. It's down from 22% last year, which was already falling, to 13% this year. But yeah, the ones on the rise, like Instagram, about 7% of recruiters use it, which is up from 4% last year. So it's a small percentage point rise, but a big rise in percentage. So it's nearly doubled in the space of a year. Mm-hmm. But interestingly, with all these things, it's how the really smart recruiters, the high performers, they aren't dropping their usage of Google Plus and Twitter. They're much more likely to use things like Instagram, 142% more likely. They're using Facebook 15% more often. So they are using the same tools, but more of a mix of them. There was literally no new magical place that came up in the survey. we ask people, what else do you use? And there's nothing. Job boards, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, a little bit of Google Plus, and then if you're in tech hiring, there's some niche sites you can use. But actually, there's no surprises. I think the days of looking for the holy grail are over. But what is so consistent is that the same point I made earlier on, that the super recruiters just use more of them more often. So it's not that they're finding people in new places. It's the same places. But the average recruiter, she reverts to the one place, maybe two sources, and she never goes back into the other places. Even though she maybe looked there last year or 2 years ago, or heard about it at a conference or on a podcast, the super recruiters are just more likely to frequently go back to multiple places to find talent.
So, Johnny, as we wrap this up here, as you look at the results from the survey from this year, any final words of advice to recruiters out there?
Yeah, so I think, the future of recruiting isn't about doing admin better. It's doing all the things that are more human. It's being more in touch with communication, which, is about listening first and speaking second. It's about selling, but also being able to communicate with your hiring managers, your clients, as much as your candidates. And to communicate credibly, you need to come from a position of authority. So to me, all of the data suggests that we have to be much better at relationships. And we have two sides. We have the candidate and we have the organization we're hiring for. We got to be better communicating with both of those. And we got to really better understand the sectors we recruit for, the industries you work within, not recruiting. But if you're recruiting in healthcare, recruiting in retail, you need to know that sector inside out and speak credibly with the hiring managers and clients and the candidates alike. So that's the kind of, to me, the big takeaways is that you have to understand your sector above your profession. So I get that we're all passionate about recruiting and how do you be more knowledgeable about where you work, and then how can you just be a better communicator with people? How can you understand the people part of it and how to influence them and get them on side as well?
That's great advice, Johnny. Well, thank you for joining me today. Appreciate the tips and information. Tell everyone where they can go connect with you and Social Talent Online.
So Google me and you'll find me, but I'm at Johnny Campbell on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. So you just put Johnny Campbell, Social Talent into any search engine and pick the medium you want to connect with. And if any of you need questions, I'm always there to try and help out.
There you go, folks. And we'll link to the survey in the show notes for the blog, for the show. That's going to do for this edition of the RecTech Podcast. Thanks again to our sponsor. Remember to check out Job Fairing for your next hiring event, jobfairing.com. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, and now Stitcher Radio. Hey, if you like the show, please leave a review on your channel of choice. I'd love to just get your feedback or mention this on social media with hashtag RecTech. You can follow me on Twitter at Chris Russell or visit rectechmedia.com. And just a reminder, I'm a consultant that helps both HR tech firms and employers get more clients or candidates. Thanks for listening, everyone. See you next time.